Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Supercars Exchange podcast. I'm here again with Shane. How you going, Shane?
Mate, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm going pretty good. So we had the Phillip Island weekend, the first real test of the aerodynamics of the cars, and also the center of gravity. And the Mustangs are still just as dominant as they were in the previous few rounds, although some of the other Mustangs, besides from DJR, have slipped away a little bit.
Yeah, it was I think DJR they've just been the supreme team all weekend as they have been for pretty much the whole year so far. But Tickford they were better than what they were last time out in Tasmania, but they still just weren't on the same level as what the Penske Mustangs were.
In the first race, with race 9 on the Saturday, we only had the 27 laps. I think it was 120 kilometres. Scott McLaughlin and then Fabian Coulthard, so a very impressive 1-2. And then Andre Heimgartner getting up there for the Nissan. I was really impressed with his performance. First ever podium that he's gotten as a full-time Supercars driver. It's just awesome performance by him.
Yeah, it was. You got to hand it to Nissan. They've struggled really for quite a long time now, and this year it looked like it was going to be much of the same. But Heimgartner certainly showed some pretty decent pace through the race. It was certainly out of all the Nissans, had the most pace. But we saw Rick Kelly up towards the pointy end for much of that race back on Saturday as well. So that was good to see for Nissan all together, really.
Yeah, it makes wonder whether the center of gravity had anything to do with it. Whether they actually are almost on a level kind of playing field now in this kind of situation.
I think it certainly helped. You can't deny that it would have been. By levelling that playing field, it gave them a little bit more of a leg to stand on. But I think aero have been their largest disadvantage over the past few years. I think they've had a few changes to the aero since they introduced themselves into the category in 2013. But really, they've had that same car the entire time. We've seen, Ford went from the FG to the FGX, now to the Mustang. Holden, at least they went and had the VE, the VF, and now the ZB. So they're the only ones that have kept the same car pretty much for the entire time.
Yeah. So we had a couple of interesting incidents in race 9. We had both Jamie Whincup and Mark Winterbottom both losing wheels in the race. Just something you really don't see that often, especially from Red Bull Racing, which is quite a high-performing team. They just didn't get that wheel on at all in their pit stop, and predictably, it just came flying off in the first left-hand bend.
Yeah, he got a bit further around the lap than I thought he was going to. I thought, a couple of corners in, that'll pop off, but I think the wheel guard must have cut enough of a groove into the tyre for it to just hang in there for a little bit longer. But it was, I don't know what's happening at Red Bull this year. They're just, every round so far, that something else just seems to happen. The whole team seems really rattled at the moment. And, it's not just the drivers that are struggling now. It's almost like we have the rest of the team starting to creep in with a couple of mistakes here and there, and then I think all in all, it's just starting to really struggle with their overall setup of the car.
I think an incident that the Mark Winterbottom incident was really overlooked from that race, considering obviously lots of people were focused right in on Red Bull because of that incident. But the fact was that Mark Winterbottom, his wheel didn't come off until several laps actually after his pit stop. So it was just very unusual. They must have not tensioned it enough, because they were discussing where they tensioned the wheel nuts to the point where they're going to stay on, kind of thing. But those sawtooth curves obviously banged them around massively. So they're speculating that might be what was the issue there.
Yeah, it's a bit hard to tell with that one. Like you said, it was just a strange one. Look, it happened quite late in the race. There was only a few laps to go, really, when that happened, and it was just bizarre to see so many. We'll see both the wheels come off those cars, and even then, we had quite a few punctures over the course of the weekend too, which we'll touch on shortly as well. But just strange from both cars, really, but a little bit for Winterbottom too. his fate seems to be entwined with Triple Eight. If they're having a decent weekend, he has a decent weekend as well. If they're having a poor weekend, he has a poor weekend as well. Like, obviously, he's got their last year's car, so you would expect it to be pretty similar. But he just had a shocking weekend as well.
Yeah. We've seen some really quite good consistent performances from Mark Winterbottom over the last couple of rounds, so it's a little bit disappointing because I was hoping to really see him step up again this weekend as he has in the previous 2 rounds. But obviously we had those 2 punches on the Saturday as well. We had Courtney and Slade have punches almost at the exact same corner, almost at the exact same time as they were coming down through the first right-hander, going towards the left, the second corner, which is the left. Both of their front rights just blew out. It's just such weird incidents occurring on that Saturday.
Yeah, well, the punctures at Phillip Island have kind of been a bit of a trend over the last 2 or 3 years. It's from what it looks like, it's more of an issue with how aggressive you go on the camber of the tyres. Like, if obviously with the better camber you give it to an extent, you're going to have better cornering speed. But the consequence to that is you're putting a lot more pressure on the inside of that tyre, and that's obviously what's causing these failures. So it's always been a fine line as to how much camber you put on that car. And I think DJR had a couple of failures back in 2017, it might have been. They might have had one each throughout the course of that weekend. And I think Triple Eight might have had one too from memory. I'm not too sure, but we've definitely seen a few over the years. And it's just a case of how much do you gamble on how much how much camber you put on those front tyres, and obviously HSV put on a little bit more than what they should, and I think it was as well. I was reading last night that DJR weren't willing to let their drivers push too hard, worrying about just if they push too hard, then the camber might cause a puncture. So it was probably a smart move from their behalf. But Wilkinshaw pushing as hard as they were, it's obviously caused an incident for them.
I think it was 2018 where we had like multiple blowouts coming down into that first corner, that left-hand bend. We just had so many blowouts, and there was one point where there was people just constantly rotating through the pit lane just because there was so many blowouts, and then they had like all that rubber debris all over that front straight there. It was just ridiculous. I think that ended up being an actual issue with the tyre in the end. But anyway, moving on to the Sunday, a bit of a longer race with 45 laps at 200 kilometres. And Fabian Coulthard has finally ended his run of second places and managed to get that first over Scott McLaughlin. And then Anton De Pasquale with an impressive performance for Penrite Racing. And we also had David Reynolds up in 4th on the Saturday. So all round, in general, was a half-decent weekend for Erebus then.
Yeah, they've certainly made a big improvement over what we'd seen previous. Like, they have had a couple of good results, but certainly Reynolds was a decent result back on Saturday, and then Sunday we've seen De Pasquale, his first podium. Huge pressure reliever for him. Like, he was under a fair bit of pressure from his team as to how long he might be able to keep that seat for. I don't think it was under too much doubt for at least the rest of this season, but they're probably already scouting around maybe for somebody else. But at least now getting the monkey off his back with this one podium. And we've seen before, like, he's had good qualifying results, but falls away in the race. And then we've seen races where he's actually had a decent finish. And if you think, well, if he had qualified up, closer to where you would expect him to be, he might have actually nudged a podium on those previous races. So Erebus was certainly the best of the Holden teams, but even then, it was varying levels. Like, we've seen Reynolds have a decent result on Saturday, De Pasquale was nowhere, and then it was the opposite for Sunday. So
Reynolds ended up 11th on the Sunday, and De Pasquale was in 12th. So both of them were out of the top 10 on the corresponding days. But but it was good for Fabian Coulthard too. Like, he's had to play second fiddle to his teammate for really a couple of years now. Yeah. And we've seen he got the one race win last year, and this year, he had a little bit of fortune go his way. Like, McLaughlin had that
bizarre pit stop where just everything happened a little bit slower for him, and he suddenly came out behind both Fabian and Di Pasquale, and and it was a good move to get back past Di Pasquale. So it was it's his favourite move coming out around turn 2. He just manages to sneak up the inside there and completes the move. But yeah, for Coulthard, he had good pace all weekend, really, for throughout qualifying as well as the race. So I think it's certainly a win, well deserved.
Yeah. Also, just going on the weirdness of Saturday, I just remembered there was when there was in the first round of pit stops, Gary Rogers Motorsport ended up double stacking when it was green flags. It was just complete mix up, but I just thought it was so strange, and it was they cut to the shot of the 2 GRM cars just double stacked there, and I thought this is just unnecessary, and it was just some kind of communication error. But yeah, that was very strange.
I think that's all it was they must have they wanted to call one of the drivers in, obviously, but they've held the button on the wrong driver, and they've both come in. But it kind of happens, and probably it's entertainment to see anyway. You like to see those occasional little stuff ups every now and again. They give you a little bit more entertainment. Well, even going back to before the races with qualifying, like I still couldn't get over how fast McLaughlin was in qualifying. To be like both races were DJR lockouts on the front row, but for McLaughlin to be, I think, 6/10 faster on Saturday and 7/10 faster on Sunday, that's a huge amount of time in the same cars. Again, there was a little bit of margin from Coulthard back to third place in both of those races, but only a little bit. But McLaughlin to be that much faster than Fabian Coulthard for both of those races was insane. Like, you knew that it probably wasn't going to carry over into race pace. It was going to be, he was going to have to tame it a little bit more there. But to have that much pace up his sleeve over one lap is just insane.
Yeah, he's just really got quite a good handle on the Mustang this year.
I think so, but even Phillip Island itself, I think it was 5 wins in a row after he won on Saturday, and he finished second on Sunday. But I'm sure if it was another car in front of him other than his teammate, he probably would have pushed a bit harder and might have been able to sneak by them. But it's kind of funny with the Mustangs though. Like, when they're in traffic, they don't seem to always have the same pace we expect them to have. Like, you look at you look at the pace when they get out in front, they can just sort of build a few seconds gap, and they'll just happily hold that over the course of like the first half of the race at least anyway. And then, but if you've seen them back in the pack a little bit, they're not really just flying through the field. Apart from that one race back at Albert Park for Mostert, where he came from towards the back of the field and finished up near the podium. We haven't seen any of the Mustangs, just if they have had a poor qualifying, just find themselves back up in the top 5. They've usually stayed back down around. So I don't know if the Mustang's quite as good in traffic as what it certainly is at the front of the field.
It's a good example of that is actually Lee Holdsworth over this weekend. He just really struggled with pace. He initially qualified in 11th for the Saturday race and ended up just going backwards down to 15th. He said later after the weekend that he was really just struggling with rear end grip, and he ended up in 14th for the Sunday race. So he made a few positions, but yeah, like you were saying, obviously not as much as we would be expecting the Mustang to make, especially in the traffic situation.
Yeah, well, you can throw out the excuse of, it's his first year back across with Ford. But not really in this day and age, especially with the car of the future. There's going to be a few things that'll seem familiar enough. Look, it's going to be still a vastly different car compared to what he just got out of. But, we've seen how Winterbottom has gone from Ford across to Holden, and he's seemed to have made a jump up compared to his results last year. And Holdsworth just seems to be still struggling down in the mid-pack. And so I'm really not sure what why he's been that poor for most of the year. I think he's only had a couple of top tens so far this season, and I think it was the second race last time out of Tasmania was probably his best, where he qualified a bit lower down, but snuck up into ninth. But this weekend he just didn't feature at all in any of the fast times. He qualified poor, and race didn't go much better for him.
I think this was actually the first weekend where Holdsworth has actually got the better of Mark Winterbottom. I've been following this battle with interest, considering they've directly swapped teams. So I thought it was just an interesting comparison.
Yeah, well, that's it. At least I suppose if you wanted to have that battle between you and the guy that took your seat and vice versa, then at least it's probably another teammate battle, I guess you could say there. Yeah. But again, I think like I said about Winterbottom, that his destiny sort of lies with what Triple Eight's doing. If they're going poor, then he'll go poor as well. So he just seemed to just not have the pace at all this weekend.
Moving on to the championship points, McLaughlin still out in the lead, almost with a whole race worth of distance back to Coulthard, with Coulthard 124 points behind. And then Mostert, Van Gisbergen, and then Reynolds up in fifth, still consistently fifth. Van Gisbergen, I think, had just a consistent enough weekend in order to just hold on to that kind of top 5 area. But Whincup just had a dreadful weekend, and he just went flying back down the field. Obviously, he didn't finish that first race because of losing his wheel, and then just didn't have the pace in the second race. He was only in 12th, so he's slipping back quite rapidly.
Yeah, well, Van Gisbergen, he's making the best of a bad situation, I guess you could say. Like where did he have 8th in the first race and 7th in both races, I think, or thereabouts.
He was 6th in the first race. Yeah, 6th and 7th.
Yep, so 6-7. It's not too bad, but you'd expect them to be fighting for podiums and race wins, and like 6th place on Saturday isn't too bad, but they were still well off the pace. Like we've seen in their times last year. Like I think the qualifying times for the Mustangs, like the DJR Mustangs in particular, were about 0.2 of a second faster than the FGX last year. So they've obviously, the Mustang, we expected it to be that bit faster, but Triple Eight were a second slower, and that may as well be a week in motorsport terms. Like that's just unheard of for Triple Eight, which sort of leads me to think that the whole team must just be so confused about what's happening, and clearly it's the Twin Springs are still the issue. It's sort of one of the, along with Aero, is one of the buzzwords going around supercars at the moment. But it's just so strange from them. Like the Twin Springs are causing the issues, but I would have thought that by now they would have been on top of it. But it almost seems to be getting worse for them.
Yeah, they seem to only be going backwards, although they are still the leading Holden team in the team's championship. Then they're followed by Brad Jones Racing. So Brad Jones Racing is really starting to challenge them. Brad Jones Racing isn't even far behind them. They're closing in quite rapidly. So I think if Brad Jones Racing has a good weekend come Barbagallo in 17 days' time, then I reckon Red Bull will probably start to slip back down that tally, and that's probably not what they want to see, especially from the Holden Racing team. That's definitely not what they want to see.
Well, exactly. But one thing I've noticed over these opening 4 race weekends is there hasn't been a Holden team that's had a good weekend, like from start to finish. Like we would have one race where one of the usually we see one Holden team still get in amongst the Mustangs. Like we've seen Di Pasquale do that back on Sunday. Like it was one of the Nissan's turns back on Saturday. But there's usually still 1 or 2 of the Commodores up there fighting amongst those Mustangs at the front. But it's never the same driver. It's always someone different. So they're just, all the Commodore teams seem to be so inconsistent at the moment. And against something that's so rare, like Triple Eight, you expect them to be fighting out with DJR for every single race so far, going on form of the last 2 years. Tickford's having a better year. They're certainly a lot more consistent, at least up in that, they're getting the odd podium. They're getting a couple of cars in that top 5, at least at most races. But it's just, with Erebus, they've had a couple of podiums. They've had, a couple of decent results, but then, the next day they fall away again, and Triple Eight sort of the same. And we've seen Brad Jones, they're going consistent, but I would have thought that with the dramas of the other teams, there was an opportunity for them to really step up and think, okay, well, we can grab this and we can be that leading Holden team. And they still haven't quite had the pace to be the ones getting all of the podiums. And it's just so bizarre to see such inconsistency and I think that's what is also leading to the Mustangs' results being so exaggerated as they are. I think, obviously DJR they're just on another planet at the moment, so you can probably understand why they've won all but the 2 races so far. But when there's nobody else keeping them honest consistently race after race, that's why we have the pair of them. I think McLaughlin is nearly 300 points ahead of Van Gisbergen.
Yeah.
He's almost got that entire round up his sleeve, and we're only 4 races in. You wouldn't dream of having a better start, really, to a championship. And it's almost at the stage now where you think, is it just going to be a battle between the 2 GJR cars for the championship? I don't think it's way too early to call that yet, of course, but it's starting to really shape up that way.
Well, that's like what we saw a few years ago, back when it was Triple Eight dominating. It was a battle between Blounds and Whincup. It was just who's going to win it out of the Red Bull kind of cars. So I think it's starting to transform almost into that. We might not see it this year, but I think if the Mustang continues on the current trajectory it's going on, I think we'll probably see that in the near future, unless the Holdens really get their stuff together and really start to challenge this Mustang.
Yeah, well, it might even just be as simple as a little bit of a changing of the guard. Like we've seen, Triple Eight have been the most dominant team for over a decade now. But before that, we had Stone Brothers there for 2 or 3 years. We had the Holden HSV dealer team, had a couple of wins in a row. Before Stone Brothers, it was HRT for like 5 years straight. Yeah. So you seem to have these eras of teams that are winning the championships, but you sort of see that when it comes to an end, they sort of go off the cliff a little bit. Well, you've seen that with HRT; they've fallen away now, and unfortunately for them, a shadow of their former glory. Stone Brothers, once they dropped off the cliff, they started to really drop down, and whereas they were still running well and still winning the odd race, but they weren't really the championship contenders anymore. We've seen FPV when they, or then at the time ProDrive, when they got their championship, suddenly they fell off a couple of years ago. It might just be that time for Red Bull now, where they might be on that. Their run might be at an end, and it's now another team that's going to step up and take the reins for a couple of years, and then it might be another team that jumps up again. Yeah.
We might, instead of seeing Red Bull shirts everywhere, we're going to start seeing Shell V-Power Racing team shirts everywhere.
Yeah, well, that's it. And in a couple of years' time, we might start seeing Brad Jones shirts everywhere.
Oh, look, I'd love to see Brad Jones up there. I think just because they're, obviously they're not a tiny team, but they're one of the smaller teams. I think it'd just be great to see them up there. It'd be awesome.
Yeah, that's it. Look, I don't think anyone really has a bad word to say about Brad Jones. Look, he's always been, he's always punched well above his weight, even when he used to race himself and had John Bowe on the team with him. And, they'd always, fight as hard as they could. And, so I think if they were to step it up and get a few more podiums this year, I think that would be well received by all the fans.
So, who would be your top performers from this weekend then?
Well, it's kind of tough. Like, it's really when you had McLaughlin and Coulthard win one race apiece, they were just a cut above the rest of the field. it's almost like you just want to give them 2.5 points each and call it that. But I've still gone with Scotty on with 3 points purely just because of the qualifying pace.
Yeah.
I think to put everybody else just like that far behind him, I think that's worth the extra point. And so I think he gets the 3 points. Fabian Coulthard, he gets my 2 points. And Di Pasquale gets my 1 point. I could have gone for Heimgartner getting a podium for Nissan, but I think Di Pasquale, it's his first podium ever. So good on him. So he gets the 1 point.
Yeah, well, for me, I'd probably go same as you. I'd go McLaughlin with the 3 points, and then Coulthard with the 2. Basically, just for the same reasons. I was just so impressed with how fast McLaughlin was in qualifying. But then for my 1 point, I've gone Andre Heimgartner because I was pretty impressed with how well he composed himself to keep that podium, because it's obviously very easy to make a mistake around Phillip Island, but in those closing laps, he just kept his cool and kept his head on and got that podium, and it was an awesome result for Nissan. I was very happy with that one.
Yeah, that's it. It could have gone either way. Like between those two, I just went Di Pasquale purely just because it was his first. Otherwise, if it was one of the Triple Eight cars, I would have definitely gone for Heimgartner. I think there. So who on my points so far for the year, I've got McLaughlin on 8, Van Gisbergen 5, Coulthard 4, Mostert 3, Winterbottom 2, Waters and Di Pasquale have 1 point apiece. Is my total so far for the year. So it's got McLaughlin running away a little bit at the top, but otherwise, second, third, fourth, they're all pretty close. So it's certainly not McLaughlin's there for our Dottie Award, the Driver of the Year award.
Yeah. We've voted mostly the same people, besides you going Di Pasquale and I went Heimgartner.
Yeah, I think they've been pretty close. A couple of points either way.
Yeah. So, a passion of yours, an enjoyment of yours has been the Super 3 category, what was used to be called the Kumo Supercars, wasn't it?
Of the Kumo V8 touring cars, it was formerly known as, but now finally part of the Supercars lineup as Super 3, which is, I think, exciting because it's another category of supercars. The main thing I like about it is that it's just another place for some of these older supercars to go to. Like we see them once they get to a certain age, they might find their way to a private collector or a museum, or sometimes they might just end up getting scrapped. But it was the series started back in 2008, and I've known back then as the touring car series, and it was one of the regulations is they have to use a deregistered supercar chassis, so that way it stops teams from effectively building a new car. So it has to be an old car that was formerly owned by one of the supercars teams, or perhaps this Super 2 category. So it's good. I think we way back at the start, you've seen cars like the VX Commodore and the AU Falcon still going around. At the time back in 2008, that's what. The last of the AUs was 2002, so they were a few years old then. Yeah. Even now, like up until last year, I think we still had Glenn Seaton's EL Falcon from like 97 running around in there. It wasn't there on the weekend. It might make an appearance later. I'm not too sure, but we see FG Falcons, VE Commodores. I think there was still a couple of BF Falcons and a VZ Commodore in there. So it's just a good way to see some of the old cars, and some of them even keep their original livery. We see a couple of the original Stone Brothers cars, the old Irwin Stone Brothers car and the SP Tools Stone Brothers car. One of the Lowndes Falcons from, I think, 07-ish, 06, 07 was in there, but they just simply changed the Better Electrical sponsor to their current one, but they kept the overall paint scheme. So just little clever things like that. That's what I'll enjoy most about it.
I think it gives a good category to go to after. Obviously, the cars kind of go from like supercars to Super 2s, and then there's not really much further to go until this category was introduced. And I think it really saves the cars rather just sitting around in someone's garage for years doing nothing, because there wasn't that many categories to actually run it in. But it's really good to see, and the cars just look awesome, as you were saying.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I think just for the young guys, some of the drivers, they're 16 years old, they're half my age.
Yeah.
And they're driving it, around Phillip Island, one of the fastest racetracks in Australia, doing 260 k's an hour, 270 k's an hour. I'll dream of doing something like that around Phillip Island as a 16-year-old. When especially a lot of other kids around their age in the Toyota 86 category, which is still fantastic in itself. But this is just another step up from that.
Yeah.
And when you see their lap times, I think they were doing 134, 135. So that's not a hell of a long way off what the supercars are doing. And when they're only 16, you know that they've still got a lot more pace to find themselves. And also, but they're also on the Kumo rubber versus the Dunlop tyres. And there would no doubt be a lot more of a budget race tyre compared to what the supercars and Super 2 teams would get. So it probably just doesn't have the same grip, therefore speed, as the other tyres anyway. So that probably accounts for a bit more of that time. So really, they're still going really fast around that circuit compared to the guys up in the main game. So it's but we have seen a few drivers, drivers of note. We got Shea Davies, Taz Douglas, they're former champions. Taz Douglas has been in supercars before. He's in Enduros mainly, but he's done a full season there, I think, with Nissan, I think he was. He was a former V8 touring car champion. And we've got Tyler Everingham, who's currently now in the Super 2 category. He's moved up through the ranks, and I think it just gives that extra platform to make you move. If you can at least be in a supercar, even though it might be 10 years old, you're still able to prove that you can handle all that much horsepower, handle the speed, and I think it'll be a better stepping stone towards supercars over perhaps like the Super Utes or the Toyota 86. I think will be like the one stepping stone into that. Which is, and like we've already seen, the likes of Brad Jones Racing and Matt Stone Racing have committed to this series. I think Brad Jones has been there for a couple of years now, but I think Matt Stone joined this year, which is good to see. I think we'll only see more. I think, especially if it means that teams can hold on to a couple of their chassis for another, or some of their older chassis, or they'll buy them back somehow and they'll run them in the Super 3 category and just give some young talent a go, and that we might see them up in the main game one day, which again, that's all what it's all about. So I just enjoy watching the kids go around and giving it a go.
Yeah, it's a really good way also to be able to track a driver's career, because obviously the when it was not an official supercars category, it wasn't given as much note during the broadcast kind of thing, so most people wouldn't have really taken notice of it. But now that it's like Super 3, people are probably going to notice it a lot more, and they're going to be able to find a favorite driver and probably watch their trajectory coming through Super 3, Super 2, and all the way up to supercars, which is, I think, is just a really cool thing to be able to see.
Yeah, well, that's it. It started off life as part of the Shannon's Nationals tour, so it didn't really feature that I can recall on a supercars weekend. And a lot of the drivers that were in it were just they were just owner drivers. They just had enough cash to be able to buy one of these cars and go race it, which is good, certainly good for them.
Yeah.
Again, I certainly wish I was in that same position, but not at the moment anyway. Maybe one day.
Yeah.
But and that's for a lot of it. It wasn't really seen back then as a stepping stone towards supercars. For a few, it might have been for the sake of experience, but now that it's become the Super 3 category, I think it's definitely going to be that most desired first step towards supercars. I think once you come out of go-karts, you'll look at something like the Formula 4 Championship or Toyota 86, and then you might spend a year or so there. Then that next step is you're going to be wanting to be up in the Super 3 category before moving on to Super 2 and then supercars. So I think it was a good move by Supercars to acquire this championship and bring it in under the Supercars banner. And we're going to see all of the rounds of that throughout the course of the year. I think last year they only had the 5-round championship, which is it's short and sweet. I think it's all taken care of before Bathurst even. I think it's all done and dusted by around then. So it doesn't last very long. But again, it's probably a good thing because a lot of these young guys, like when they're only 16, 17, they're probably not going to have the ability to find a lot of sponsorship at that age. And
also have to go to school.
And that's it, exactly. They're still at school, or you hope they're still at school anyway. And yeah, so like they wouldn't be able to provide the same funding. The teams aren't going to have a lot of funding to be able to do this. So by keeping the championship short and sweet, I think that's a good thing, and keep the cost down for them.
So that just about sums up our weekend review. The next event is in Barbagallo, and it's the night race over in Barbagallo. One of the races on the Sunday is starting at 8:45 p.m. So it's gonna be a late night for a few people. But obviously Barbagallo is quite a lot shorter than Phillip Island is. So, and it's got a bit of aero coming through like the first kind of like chicane area, but really it's more just a point and shoot kind of circuit again. So we might see it come back towards Red Bull a little bit, depending on whether they get their setup right for this or not. It's a little bit of a difficult track to set up for, obviously, because that first little section is a little bit weird compared to the rest. We've only got 2 races this at Barbagallo, and we've got the 3-part qualifying again with the knockouts, like we just have seen in Phillip Island and Symmons Plains. So that's going to be interesting to see what lighting is like at Barbagallo.
Yeah, I think they're trying to make it a little bit better than what we've seen at Eastern Creek. Like I think that was one of the complaints. Remembering last year, there were times when it was a bit more difficult to see the cars. Like it was great seeing the flames out of the exhaust pipe and those glowing brake discs. That was fantastic to see. But when you'd see them come over the hill, and all you'd see was just the lens flare from the headlights.
Yeah.
And it was just a case of, well, who am I looking at? Like it just all looked the same. It wasn't until they got down to the corner and you'd see them turn in. Like, oh, okay, I'm looking at a shell car.
Yeah.
So it just became very hard to tell. So I think a little bit more lighting might make it a little bit easier. But I guess we'll wait and see when we get there. I think I did hear somewhere that was what they were looking at, was a little bit more lighting. It's a shorter circuit, so you'd think it should be a bit easier to light than Sydney Motorsport Park. And I'm glad they've gone to the two races. Last year at Eastern Creek, I thoroughly enjoyed the race. It was a really good race. You didn't know who was really going to win until the last minute, really. Like, we've seen McLaughlin just in front the whole race pretty much, and it wasn't until that last safety car that suddenly Triple Eight were just in the box seat and they just were able to pass him on better tyres, and that was it. It was game, set, match. And so I think, I think the attention span, especially for the younger kids watching the race, might have been a bit too hard to try and get them to sit down and watch 2 hours, 2.5 hours worth of supercars racing. Yeah, so one race I don't think quite worked. I didn't mind it. Back in I think 2003, I think a lot of the races went to a single Sunday afternoon race, and I preferred that over trying to watch a race on Saturday and a couple of races on Sunday. I preferred that because you knew that, well, if you had stuff to do on the weekend, well, if you get it done Saturday, you can sit down Sunday afternoon and watch the V8 supercars. But that only hung around for a year. I think for that same problem is, some people couldn't watch the whole race, or they found it boring. That if it was a bit processional, you just had a lot of the same. But I think 2 races for a nighttime race I think works out better. And plus, at least it's not going to go till midnight over here on the East Coast. So I think that's better. And at least we're going to be able to, for the footy fans, you're going to be able to at least get most of the football over and done with on the Saturday before you tune in to watch the supercars. So you'll still be able to get the best of both racing and your footy for those that support the footy. And again, we've got the knockout style qualifying, which I think almost has to stay at almost every circuit now. I think it's it's really entertaining. Like, you put a bit more emphasis on practice, and it's always, especially that first knockout stage where the bottom 15 go out, or bottom 14 go out, and only the top 4 get to survive. So the bottom 10 are out. Like that, it really puts a lot of emphasis on trying to get that lap nailed. And we've seen it catch out a few drivers. Like it caught out Whincup on Saturday, and it caught out Reynolds, I think, on the Sunday. So it's, it really adds to, it gives something else to qualifying rather than just sending them out for 20 minutes and whoever's fastest has pole. It does eliminate some of that issue of cars being blocked, which you could argue is kind of exciting in its own way, but you don't like seeing your driver's day get ruined by someone trying to warm up their tyres. Yeah. So I think this way it eliminates that, and if they're not fast in practice, well, they're going to have to go out and burn an extra set of tyres on the next stage of qualifying, and if they're still not fast enough, well, they're going to be starting towards the back.
So looking forward to the next race. I just think it's awesome to be racing under nights. But the next little section that we're going to be talking about is a bit less formal. We're going to be talking about how both of us first got into supercars. So Shane's a little bit older than me, so he's going to be talking about a few years prior to when I was watching it. He was still watching in the Brock days, and I wasn't. So if you'd like to tell us about that, Shane.
Maybe not quite back that far, but it wasn't too far. You might have been a toddler when I first started watching supercars, but well, it's kind of funny. I guess it kind of started when the likes of Brock and Dick Johnson were still racing around. For me, it was 94 Bathurst. I used to still sit down and watch Bathurst, even though I wasn't much of a racing fan. But Bathurst was just one of those events that you would at least watch on and off throughout the day. And I remember it got towards the end of the race, and Dick Johnson crosses the line first, and what do I care? I don't even know what I'm looking at. And I was only 10 at that stage, and my mum's sort of yahooing a bit. I'm like, oh yeah, go Dick Johnson, yeah, well. And I'm like, why? Why does anyone care? Like, and I thought, but doesn't everyone go for Peter Brock? And Mum said, no, we go for Dick Johnson. He's a Queenslander, and I'm a Queenslander because I support the Broncos. I go for Queensland and State of Origin. I grew up being a footy fan more than anything, and so I thought, well, if Dick Johnson's a Queenslander, well, that's good enough for me. So I was straight away just a Dick Johnson fan, and it was just incidental that he drove a Falcon, and because she brought that up too, she goes, oh, he's a Queenslander and he drives a Ford, and I thought, well, even then I thought, well, hang on, don't most people go for Holden? And Mum said, oh no, like all of your family drove Fords, like I think it was her grandparents and her aunties and uncles that drove old Fairmonts and stuff back in the day. I think one of her relatives may have been a salesman at the old Metro Ford in the city at the Woolloongabba, and so I thought, oh, I guess that kind of makes me a Ford fan now. So that's sort of where that all started, and just so from then on, up at least until Dick retired, that I was a fan of his, and I sort of jumped on with Glenn Seaton a little bit because he was doing quite well for Ford, and I still wasn't really watching a lot of the races. It wasn't really until late in high school, about 99, 2000, was where I started to watch a few more races. Didn't have a lot to cheer about. We had the AU Falcon, which it did not have a very good winning percentage, and it wasn't the most attractive car.
Good.
But I think some of the paint jobs, I think even today there's still a lot of love for the green-eyed monster. Yeah, that's it. And so I think that's for me. That's just sort of where it started. Was back with Mum. Yahoo and that Dick Johnson won Bathurst back in 1994 and that's what sealed it. If he didn't win that day, I may never have even become a Ford fan or a racing fan to begin with. It was purely because Mum said that he was a Queenslander, and I thought, well, I love Queensland. I'm a Broncos fan. I'll go for Queensland and State of Origin. It just has to be to support the Queenslanders. So that was it. And I think that's where Dick Johnson gets a lot of his support from, is he's just one of Queensland's sons in a way. He's he just goes forward from that. But I think once it got to the beginning of the BA era in supercars, that locked me in. Like straight away when Ambrose was able to start getting a lot of race wins early on in 2003 and went on to win the championship, I thought, I've finally I know I've made the right call now. Like it took a while to get there. It took a couple of years of watching the AUs finishing, outside of the podium for a lot of races there. That I thought, I've made the right call. We've won a championship now. It's not all a waste of time.
The Ambrose payoff was good.
Yeah, that's it. So it was that locked me in for being certainly a Ford fan for life. I think I was already a Ford fan for life anyways, but as far as watching supercars and cheering on the Blue Oval in races there, that locked me in for sure. It was when Ambrose won in 2003.
Yeah. You drive a Falcon, don't you?
I do. Being the Ford nut that I am, I've only ever driven Fords. I've owned four, all of them Fords, and 3 of those were Falcons. I lost my way a little bit for a few years, and I bought a Focus because I thought, my old XR6 Turbo was starting to. I kind of just thrashed it too much, really. And I thought I'll get something sensible, and I bought a Focus, and then 12 months later came the announcement that Ford was going to stop manufacturing, and I thought, what have I done? I've caused this. I bought a Focus instead of Falcon, and I made my decision. Then I thought I've got to get one of the last of the Falcons, and when they announced the return of the XR8, I thought that'll do me. I'll get one of those. So the bank was stupid enough to give me a loan, and I went out and bought an FGX XR8 back in right at the end of 2015.
Yeah, it's a very nice looking car. I've seen some pictures of it. It's an awesome looking car.
Yeah, it's oh man, it goes. Yeah. It certainly moves a bit. So yeah, and I've already made myself the promise that I won't sell that. I'll still hopefully go on buying Fords into the future if they still make stuff that's good. Certainly love a Mustang, but I don't think I can afford to buy 2 expensive cars in a row. My partner might have something to say about that now.
Yeah, maybe.
I might have to stick with a little Fiesta or something like that the next time out, like a second-hand 5-year-old Fiesta get that for $8,000 or something like that. Yeah. That might be what I'm confined to for now. But I think that's something that I've already decided that I'm not going to sell. When the time comes and I have kids, and hopefully that's what I'm able to pass on to them. Yeah. And once I just depart from this earth, then they can sell it for all I care. I won't be able to do much about it then, but it'd just be nice being able to pass it on to the kids and at least be able to tell them that, hey, we used to make these cars, and Holden made Commodores, and Ford made Falcons, and they were both really good, but we just weren't buying them, and so they stopped making them. But this is what we used to have, and you never know. By then they'll be like, but it runs on fuel. But what's this liquid you have to pour into it? That's just stupid.
Can't buy it anywhere.
Yeah, that's it. Where do you plug it into the wall? It'll be one of those ones. So, but yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to, is just being able to at least pass that part on. But yeah, that's where I got my start, is back when Mum was cheering on Dick Johnson, of all people. Normally it's everybody's dads that they grow up with motorsport. Me, it was Mum just yahooing like an idiot after Dick Johnson crossed the finish line at Bathurst.
So my experience was a little bit less incidental. I grew up in Jabiru, which is a very tiny town, which is about 300 kilometers east of Darwin, and obviously Darwin has Hidden Valley at it. So before I was even born, my family was going to Hidden Valley for the Supercars race, and they started supporting Craig Lowndes there. And at the time, Craig Lowndes wasn't even performing very well, so I'm not sure why they were supporting him. He was a very nice bloke, though. He was still a lovely bloke. But then, basically, as soon as I was born, we were going to the V8, so I thought it was pretty awesome. So, and then we moved to Townsville, where I live now, and obviously there's a race in Townsville as well. And for a few years there, we would travel back and forth because the Darwin and the Townsville round are very close together, and we would travel to the Darwin round before the Townsville round to go watch that, and then come back to Townsville and then watch the Townsville
road trip or fly.
We did both actually. The
road trip would be insane.
Yeah, and with 7 people in the family too, so
all crammed into one car. I'm hoping you at least had a bus or a van.
Oh, we had a really big Land Cruiser, so we'd travel.
Oh, that's all right. There was still room for 10 more.
Yeah, we traveled halfway across Australia. I think in 2006 and 2007. I think, and then 2008 and 2009 we flew from Cairns. But in 2006 and 2007 we drove all the way over to Darwin, all the way back again. We're like traveling basically with the transporters to Townsville.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
It was awesome. We would just see them all the time. But yeah, I just thought, this is wicked. And I didn't realize how lucky I was to be able to see 2 races so close together. But obviously my family supports Supercars massively. Everyone is really, really into it. But I think I'm probably the most committed. I will wake up at like 6 a.m. to watch Bathurst or earlier. So I'm a little bit of the crazy one. Yeah.
And no one understands. They think that this is like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I've got to get up early and watch the race. And
you have to.
Yeah, that's it. When you say it like I have to, and it's like, well, you don't wake up early to mow the lawn. I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't provide the entertainment Supercars does.
The race
it's their illness.
Race doesn't start till 10 a.m., but you've got to be up at 6 to start watching.
Yeah, that's right. And because my partner, lover, like she sometimes has a hard time distinguishing one category to the next, so I just say it's all Supercars. So she's happy to cop that. I'm like, yeah, it's Supercars. It's the race now, and then qualifying's later, then there's another race this afternoon. Well, that's weird, but okay, play on. Off she goes. All right, sweet. We'll keep watching.
Since you briefly talked about your Falcon, I thought I'd talk about my car. I'm not really either Ford or Holden, because obviously I supported Craig Lowndes. He's been both, so I've had to be pretty lenient with what car I've supported. But my dad passed down to me a 1975 HJ1 tonner Holden.
That's still pretty sweet though.
It's beautiful, but I restored it over about 5 years, so that has a lot of sentimentality to me. And I drive it every day to uni. It's beautiful. I just fixed up the gasket, the manifold gasket on it, and it drives a lot better now than it was before.
no doubt.
Yeah, it was blowing exhaust all out the top, and I'm like, I need to fix this.
Yeah, this will just not do.
Yeah, it's only got a little 202 in it, so it's not the quickest, but it's beautiful to drive.
Oh, it'll look the part.
Oh, it looks beautiful.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
Well, you're still only on your P, so you can't even have a V8 in it anyway.
Have a V8.
No, one day maybe.
Yeah, I've got 2 years until I can put a massive 300-liter V8 in it.
Yeah, that's it. It's as big as big an engine as you can find.
Yeah, the engine bay in it is massive as well, so I don't think I'll struggle for size. I think I might have to upgrade the differential though, because it has a bit of a tendency to blow up. So.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry. I'm already on the second diff in my car. I might be finding another one soon. But it was a common problem with the FGX. Anyone who owns one out there will know just how fun it's been with our differentials over the years. So I'm part of a couple of FGX clubs down here in Brisbane. So I've got the Club FGX of Brisbane, and then there's an FGX Owners Club around. That's Australia wide. And it's hard going more than a few weeks before someone says, "Oh, my diff's starting to have a bit of a clunky noise to it." Oh, yeah, I'll join that club. So
You're gonna
as
need
much as we love
one.
our cars and we're not going to get rid of them anytime soon, it's definitely something that's given us the you know what's over the past couple of years.
Yeah. Well, that just wraps up our podcast. Thank you very much for joining me, Shane.
No worries. We'll look forward to the next race in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, we might do a couple little podcasts in between, not as long as this one, but it's been very enjoyable. Thank you all very much for listening, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.